Hello everybody. So initially I thought that I was going to do pads, which we still will, but I think that was kind of like a small use case or like just like a very specific point of view when it comes into finding things that are tonal as a whole. So I kind of just wanted to give you some clues and some insight, especially if you're using Bitwig, on how to create, I guess, tonal or melodic or anything of the sort in order to find a hook or to find something in general. Now, the cool thing about this is that we really are more focused on rhythm as opposed to like finding something that's a melody. So this is going to be a relatively long video and I've got a few different things to cover. So I really think that honestly, you're going to want to revisit this video. Um, the other thing is that you might want to like just grab a coffee or something and put it on in the background so you don't have to listen to with too much intent, and then as you digest it, maybe take one trick at a time or so. But I do think that fitting this into one specific section will be worth it. And yeah, let's not waste any more time. So I made this crappy beat in Logic while I was trying to review it, Logic for iPad anyways, and this is what it sounds like. Which I guess the beat itself isn't too terrible, but it doesn't sound really like a whole lot of interesting things that are happening. So one thing that we can do with this, and this is going to be just pretty much the easy way out, is that we can actually take a piece of rhythm here. So let's just take this part. And if we really wanted to, we could just throw something called a replacer on this. And what's really cool is if we were to throw this on here, then we can actually replace this with any kind of note. And because we can replace this with any kind of note, let's say we wanted to turn this into just a very simple, let's go with phase plant and turn this into a pluck, then we could definitely do something like that. That's very, very easy to do. So now, as you can see, like that's pretty awesome that we could do something like that. So like that's kind of the easy way out, I guess, if you really wanted to find something or create something that is somewhat rhythmic. And then what we can do is we can always process this sound into something else. But I'm not really going to go into sound design with this in particular because this is kind of just like your quick cheat sheet if you don't know what else to do. So the other thing that we can do is kind of the long route, and let's just make some kind of tone out of this in the first place. So alright, so this little guy right here is already somewhat tonal. And what we could always do on this is we can actually hit Command B, and with this little guy, we can actually create a kind of melody from this. And we don't really need to know what key this is in just yet. We just need to remember what is going to be the home key. So if I were to do something very simple like this, then we've already kind of created a very simple melody. But we can also do something kind of like maybe pitching around with 7 semitones. We can also do something kind of like that, I guess, where we can create some other things. But the thing is that it's relatively limited because while we're working on this, right, it doesn't give us a whole lot to manage. So kind of like what we did with the basses and the snares and all that other stuff, I do a couple of things. One is we can try to see if there's a fundamental on here, which it looks like there is. So because of this, right, what we can do is we can actually kind of cater towards building this or treating this like it's some kind of instrument. So if I were to maybe, let's just do this now and let's go ahead and bounce this, then I can actually say, okay, well, this is something that's somewhat melodic. And if we change the pitch moderately, then we can actually detect what that's supposed to be, right? So if we were to take a step back on this now, though, what we can also do is we can fortify this if we wanted to with a resonator. So we could use just a regular one and go into to D#2. And because we're already pushing this through an EQ, like we don't need this to be absolutely insane. Sorry, C#4. So we'll leave it there as that, to C#3 maybe, because I think that. And as you can see, we're creating that kind of tonal thing now. And so if we really wanted to, what we could also do because of that is maybe for one, back off of the mix. Then we could add some kind of saturation to this. So we don't really want to go too crazy, but I'll just use Saturn. And we can kind of just give this a little bit of, yeah, say warm tape. Now we really don't want to do that because that's kind of pulling everything out a little bit more, but we can EQ this how we really want this to. So it could be something even as simple as this. Now it's not so sharp. And then we could add some kind of reverb or delay to this. So let's say we wanted to use Timeless 3, and you don't need Timeless 3. I just like the way that Timeless 3 sounds. So we could do some kind of medium, sure, guitar, perk, synth, motion. Maybe this one. And what we've also done with the delay is we've created some kind of rhythm. So if we were to just kind of set this here. Or we can play around with different types of placement on here. So at any point in time, we could quick bounce this, and we could create a variation of this. So we can go like +12. We could also maybe add some reverb to this. Or we could also replace this and maybe bring this here and go back to this little guy and bring this down by 12. So we could try this as well. Or we could even try pitching this up by either 7 semitones or down 7 semitones or 3 or 5. Any increment or any kind of thing in order to create a melody really is what we're going for here. But I like to kind of just mess around in this world because it just kind of helps me find something that is relatively organic but also is somewhat, I guess, like rhythmic, if you will, and tonal. So this is the kind of imagination that you need to start thinking about when you're making these kinds of riffs. And right now we're still in audio, of course. But with that being said, there's no reason why, if you wanted to create some kind of musical instrument out of this, that you couldn't go into a few different options. So let's just leave, say, the reverb on here. So that way it's just kind of, I don't know, nice, I guess, if you will. And from this, we can always pull this into a sampler. And now we can manipulate this into any kind of sound shape that we want to. So if I were to... The only thing with this is that before you do this, you probably, again, want to just make sure that you're picking the right pitch. So what we can do without going into anything is, or I guess one other way that you could do this as well, It really doesn't matter the order, but I usually go to the original source sample in order to figure out what this is. I think it was in, so there it is, C#4. So if we were to go back into this little guy and go to C#4, then there we go. Now, I guess something else that you can do is, like, if you're really lazy, then you can actually just set a rhythm of a melody like it, or a rhythm of a one-note melody like this. And then duplicate it. And now what we can do is we can just be like, and now what we're doing here is just really creating something that's ascending or descending. So now it might make more sense to go shift. So now whenever we listen to this, we might want to pitch this up an octave as well, but we can actually use this as some kind of nice ascending characteristic with this. So we can also be like giving this a little bit of swing here with these close ones. So and the thing about this is that this sounds super vanilla right now. I guess we could have also done the pitch, but and sometimes that's actually a little bit better. So if we were to undo this a bunch of times, I guess I just want to show you the show you the difference, because sometimes that can be super helpful. But if we start here and then honestly we just grab the pitch and do things this way, we can kind of just pull that up to something arbitrary, and then you can also use a frequency shifter with this as well if you'd rather do it that way. So let's go ahead and grab this and pitch that up though. And I'm just going to move these over again. And then what we can do is take some of these and move them off a little late too. So anything that hits on beat, we can leave where it's supposed to be, and everything else we can kind of pull over and kind of just, that's already off, so we can move that one off too, and move that one off. Or we can also hit reverse on this as well, and we can move this one here, and this one will be kind of early now, but what we could do instead is maybe see if that did that. It's still going up, so instead what I'll do is I'll keep it here, but we'll go downwards now. So we can kind of just bring things, and you can really start from anywhere, it doesn't really matter, but just as a means of creating cool and interesting movement. This is like the cheat sheet to creating like 808 drops with a weird texture layer. And obviously, as you can tell, there's going to be some kind of how do you say, like middle ground in between, and about how far you should go. But yeah, again, there's kind of a trial and error aspect to this. Right, so you can definitely do something like that and then automate the reverb or whatever. But since this also has a tone on it, then sometimes we can maybe even add a low pass filter. And we can set this to loop mode and move this way. Bonk. And now what we can do is we can pull this back up. So and as you can hear, we can create some really cool and interesting kind of pads, if you will. We can also kind of pull back off of this if we wanted to, because that fundamental is pretty much just a sine wave. So now, as you can tell, it's getting kind of crazy. So we most likely want to add some kind of EQ or compression to this. But let's see what happens if we play chords. And sometimes it's really cool to play chords on this because it's gonna like kind of offset everything. Now, if you wanted to distort that, then you can create some crazy textures with that as well. So that's really cool. So if I were to now, one other thing that we might want to do is add some kind of attack to this. And what we could also do is grab a pitch shifter. I'm going to use the kilohertz one because it's just a little bit cleaner, but I can maybe try this at a 50-50. We'll see what happens. But if I set this at an octave up and then send it through a reverb, so we're getting somewhat kind of like a pseudo shimmer. That's nice. So something else that we might want to do is add some kind of compression to this. So the reason why is because you can see that those frequencies are kind of popping out hecka hard, if you will, and sometimes adding a little bit of compression as opposed to just doing major subtractive EQ can be super helpful. So we'll add a long release and then we can turn some of the makeup on here. And if you notice, it sounds a little bit more consistent now. And that's a really nice, just hollow sounding pad that I think is really cool. Now the other thing that we can do with this is we can right click this and go into convert to multi-sample. And now that we have that, we can double click on this, or sorry, there we go. Now when we double click on this, what we can also do is come into this and add some Foley. Now the thing with this is that if you go the Foley route, you usually don't want to play chords because you're going to, well, it might be okay. Let's go ahead and play around and see what we can get. But what I'm going to do is just find some stuff here. Sure. And instead of leaving this in repitch mode, I'm going to leave this in texture mode. And I'm going to turn this off for just a hot sec. And also come out of the filter. And I will leave the compressor on, and then I'll turn crystalline off, but we're going to kind of backtrack a bit. But what we can do here with this is set these different Foley things on here into multiple instruments, and we'll leave this where it is. It doesn't really matter. But when we come back into our sampler now, we're going to set its textures and maybe even just play with freezing this, if you will. Because sometimes when we play with this, then you can get some cool stuff. But this is more of something that's like tonal, but kind of creating weird and off types of sounds. Now, because of this, we might actually want to turn this bounce up. I didn't mean to do that, not this one. This guy. Let's turn this one up and make it kind of low pitched. And then this one, same thing. And then what we can do is maybe just focus on this guy right here. So now you can hear that we're still getting like an interesting texture, and there's something that's somewhat tonal, but because of this, we're getting like weird sounds on here. Now all we have to do in order to create something interesting out of that is bring back some of this stuff here. We can also turn this off and play with the speed, or something else that we can do is play with this mode here. So or we can bring this back and just get some really crazy sounds that are kind of, again, meant not to be so musically harmonic, but more so in the sense of like having a bunch of variety, if you will. And so from this, it really depends on how you like to shape and manipulate sounds that are coming from samples. But the thing is that even with all these approaches, what I find myself doing quite a bit is mostly fishing for something that's relatively tonal through here. And I actually think that I put myself in a corner because I don't think that you need to do that, because we can create things that are tonal through here, but we really kind of want to focus on something that could be rhythmic. So if you've got a cool loop or something, you know, even just this thing right here, which I think is pretty interesting, then we're like, okay, well, what if this would sound like a melody? You know, what kind of thing could this become? And then we want to start building from there. But every once in a while, if you get some cool like pies or something, you might actually hear something that is somewhat reminiscent of a melody or the sort. And so sometimes it might be wise to just kind of go with that. So, you know, if this were to be, you know, down a pitch or something, you can like push something so hard that a fundamental starts pulling itself out. That's actually kind of cool. So So you see how I kind of just forced a tone out of that? And I don't always do that, because obviously look at what's happening. So we can, I don't know, just grab a saturator or something to try to. But sometimes it can be really cool to mess with stuff like that, especially because we're pushing that resonance so hard that the sounds that come through it are going to be like imperfect. But you can see that it almost sounds to me like it's like kind of falling. So it almost sounds like it's going do, do, but not a whole semitone, kind of like half or in between. And that sounds really cool to me. So if we were to distort that, so maybe even if we were to just use regular distortion, and when I pick different distortions and stuff, it's usually because of something specific, but don't feel like you need to, you know, have all of these that I own or possess or whatever. It's really just a matter of, I don't know, memorizing your tools, but you can get the job done with all of these. But yeah, so now what would happen if I were to add, I don't know, say like an OTT on this or something? could add something like a short delay to this. I'm going to use this one. Right, we can always add some reverb to this or some mid-side EQ in order to kind of make it seem like it's a little bit wider or has more interest. So again, I typically go for anything that can be stereo widening. We can use the ensemble, we can use convolution reverb, we can use delay, we can use chorus, we can use phaser, you can use distortion. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's just really just try it and see what it does. Just make sure that you have a limiter on with whatever it is that you're doing. But okay, so you see how this is in mono? That means that whatever we bounced, unfortunately, is like that. So what we might want to do is add just a touch of chorus, because this is meant to be something that's like a, how do you say, like a, I don't know, something melodic in general. And you can keep this in mono if you want to, but I don't really find it to be that necessary, especially if we're just in the sound design exploration process. But adding a little bit of a chorus to this will actually give us something for this to pull from now. And you don't have to do this. You can keep this dry if you want to, but just as a matter of exploring. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do there that kind of gives us a cool and interesting rhythmic piece now that we can play with spacing and stuff, you know. And for whatever reason, we can, you know, go back to some of these steps and open some other stuff up. So let's say we wanted some high end to be more crispy. Right, then we could even repeat some of these distortions and stuff and create just like monstrous, crazy delay feedback sounds if we wanted to. And the thing is that whatever pitch this is now, so it's looking like we just picked one, right, which is G4. We could always pitch this into something else with a frequency shifter or even a pitch shifter if we really wanted to. But if I were to use this, and we kind of forget about whatever key that's in. Right, then we can kind of shift that as well. And so from this, it really starts to get into kind of just experimental effects and understanding that we have a lot of different ways to pull a tone out of this, as long as we have something that has quite a few harmonics in it. And if it's just a sine wave, it's actually easier to work with. There's so many different ways to manipulate this kind of stuff. It's really just a matter of what you're going for. But I will reiterate that a lot of times after I'm doing some kind of processing to whatever it is that I'm like starting with a loop or something, I will try to find something that is tonal or find some kind of tonal hook to start my beat from. But using some of these techniques, in case if like you get something and like nothing pops up, but maybe there's a cool rhythm that you find, then you can use the replacer. You can, you know, force a tone with an EQ or with a resonator. You can also use different aspects of feedback with delay to create a specific kind of tone and then shape it from there. But really, it's up to you and your imagination about, you know, hearing a piece of something that could be something greater, right? And now it doesn't matter if it's with kicks or with percussion or snares, or, you know, hi-hats is just ridiculous. That's so easy. Just if you really if you really need to, then just distort it to where it's noise and then high pass it, and then make it really quiet. So that shouldn't even warrant a video. But I mean, for everything else, you kind of have these different approaches now about how to shape whatever it is that somebody throws at you into something else. So hopefully that was enjoyable. This is probably going to be the last video, unless if I can think of something else. But for the most part, this should have you covered for just about every sound that you're most likely going to need inside of a track, right? Whether it be using this for stuff that's melodic, or the basses, or all the other things. But if you have any questions, then hit me up in the Discord and let me know what you guys think about this video. And if you have any other requests for future master classes or something, let me know and I'd be happy to work on that. Thanks guys, I'll see you later.